What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you with the one, the only Mort Jensen of the NBA podcast fame, of Yahoo Sports fame, of Forbes fame, and of OnlyFans celebrity. We are continuing along with our biggest offseason questions for every team in the NBA. We're going by division. Today is the Atlantic Division. You could go check out all the other divisions we've done. I think as we're recording this, the NBA Finals are still going on, so we have not done Central or Northwest for obvious reasons. All the other ones will be done after this. And for anyone looking for, if we haven't gotten to your team on the offseason look-aheads, one, huge update. Mort has agreed to help us finish those off as Grant and I deal with some logistical scheduling issues. And two, they will be coming. Some teams are going to come after the draft, and we haven't been covering the draft aside from draft pick cap holds anyway. But rest assured, we will get to every team, and I'll close on this. Freaking subscribe or share these episodes because we're very close to reaching multiple podcasts a day territory to make sure all these look-aheads and division things get up. With that little spiel out of the way, Mort, how the heck are you?
I am doing well. I've had another person reach out and ask why they can't find my link on OnlyFans. So, there we go. There we go. Perhaps at some point...
Did you tell them it's direct to consumer, that they get their each own individual link once they sign up? Yeah.
I probably should. Which is great, though. Like, people genuinely going to OnlyFans and looking up my name. That is haunting in many ways.
I mean, I guess it feels like there would be a market for scantily clad NBA analysis and that you need to corner it. That's what we've just learned from that little exchange.
Absolutely.
So as a reminder, we will each pose our biggest question, and we've had a nice dynamic where Mort takes like the super macro view, and then I'll either step on the toes of that with a micro question from it or just go something completely different, and it'll be a little bit more micro. These have been fun. I'm excited to get started, and we'll begin alphabetically, just like always. The Boston Celtics, Mort. Nothing going on there, right? What's your big question for them?
Well, are they going to take a gap year, or are we looking at a small teardown? I mean, we know that... Well, we don't really know because it hasn't been said outright, but we suspect that Jason Tatum is going to miss the entirety of next season. That would track, all things considered, because that's a gruesome injury. So you have to wonder, how are the Celtics going to attack this? Are they basically going to say, well, look, we're going to sign someone to hold us over for that 1 year? Or are they looking at this as sort of an opportunity to say, maybe we start going in a different direction. Maybe we start saving some money. Jaylen Brown, perhaps he's not as unavailable on the market. That's something that you'll get into later. I just want to know, what is their mindset in all this? Their best player is going to miss presumably all of next year. That's not an unsubstantial element. That's pretty significant. So, what's the deal, yo?
Yeah, and look, mine's the same, so we'll just attach it to it, is will Derek White and or Jaylen Brown become part of that collateral damage? Because what I think is interesting about this situation, and especially what you're saying, if you hear the word small teardown, I think Celtics fans or just some people will say, oh, fuck no. It's more likely that the Celtics don't cut salary and they try and compete without Tatum. Maybe that happens. I'm open to anything being on the table.
Same.
But here's the thing. I think Jason Tatum's going to come back and still be an all-NBA level player. But you're not just talking about next year. You are talking a little bit about the year after that, where it's he needs to come back. What does he look like? And you need to figure out what type of team you need to have around him at that point, because that part of your team building process, of your look, might change. And so when I look at the Celtics, maybe Jason Tatum comes back and is just the same player right away. That'd be great. I'll hope for it. But the Celtics have to think in those multi-year, longer term terms, just to say, okay, if this is going to be a 2-year thing, look at the age of Derek White. Look at how much Jaylen Brown is owed. And look, we're talking about cutting salary. Let's throw some numbers out there. This team is $25+ million into the second apron when you're factoring in their draft pick. And that doesn't include, do you want to bring back Luke Cornett or Al Horford, both of whom are free agents. And that means if they wanted to duck the tax entirely more, we're talking about shaving more than $40 million at that point from the bottom line. So, you're going to need to trade some pretty sizable salaries. And the reason I think White and Brown's names come up is, for Jaylen Brown, all-NBA type player on a massive deal. Derek White, just a little older, but it's also because the Drew Holiday contract, I think a lot of people might consider that it's underwater. The Kristaps Porzingis contract, it's a big number even though it's expiring. And even if you're the Celtics, you might prefer just to hold on to that because then it comes off the books next summer rather than moving him for these smaller salaries that might trickle in to 26, 27. It's a very complex situation. I don't know what they're going to do. I know what I would do. What would you do if you're like, are you just pulling the ripcord on the Jaylen Brown? Or are you identifying multiple players of this core that you think should be shipped out? How are you approaching this if you're Boston?
I'm open to a lot of different pathways if I'm Boston. I'm not saying, oh, I'm going to stick with this and then just be, pig-headed about it. Like, if an opportunity arises where I can cut costs, but I can build something for the future, where I don't want to just give up Jaylen Brown, for example, for, cap relief.
That just send him to Brooklyn for number 8.
Right. Like, no, I need something in return. I need to do something here. Like, if this is a pivot where I can allow myself to build something around Jason Tatum moving forward, yeah, I'm not closing that door, although it's a gamble. I mean, it's a risk because you don't really know how he's going to look after he returns. But if I can get off the Jaylen Brown contract and I can get something interesting in return, I'm definitely not closing that door. If I can extend with Kristaps Porzingis on a deal that's not half of what he makes now, but like maybe in the 20s, like early 20s instead. Yeah, I'm not opposed to doing that either. Like, there are a lot of different ways you can go about this. The Drew Holiday contract, like, that's the one where I'm like totally willing to just like, oh, you want him? Like, can we just get off of this one? Sure, fine, take him.
Do you think they're going to need to attach an asset to Drew Holiday, or do you think there's a team that would be willing to you're not going to just get his contract off, but they would send back either an expiring contract or contracts, or even just, let's say, 2 cheaper players that are then easier to move on their own?
Yeah, see, I would be open to that, but I think I do think it'll cost an asset. I do think that will be something that a trading team will look at and go, $32.4 million this year, $34.8 million next year, and then there's a player option when he's like $500 million years old for $37.2 million. That is too rich. Like, we'll need something.
3 years and 104.4 in total is a lot of money when you look at where he's at.
That's a ton of money for a guy who's 35. And like, look, he's so good. I'm not going to sit here and say he in isolation isn't worth the money. That's not what I'm saying. But for a team like the Celtics that are this expensive and they handcuff themselves dramatically by being over the second apron, yeah, I'm just willing to pivot because Drew Holiday in a year is going to be 36. Like you said, it could be a 2-year thing for Jason Tatum. Then Holiday is going to be 37. Then really, like, honestly, is he going to be a major asset on the floor for you? I mean, that could go both ways, but I'm inclined to lean no.
Yeah, and you could even say, like, what if you just moved him with Derek White? And so then you're talking about so much money just at once to account for in the trade. Because you could view, all right, we're going to move Derek White anyway. We'll use him as kind of the asset to get Drew Holiday off, but we're still getting value in return. The question I want to ask you is, when you look at these 5 players, I'll even say 6, Sam Hauser, Peyton Pritchard, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday. If I set the over-under at 1.5 of those guys being traded over the offseason, would you take the over or the under?
Oh, that's a good number. I'm going to say the under for now. I think one guy is going to get moved. I don't know who, but I think one guy is going to get moved. And then I think they're going to get into the season, see what's up. And then by the trade deadline, maybe they're open to pivoting off player number 2.
So do you think that then they're just not going to stay in a second apron? I would be shocked. Do you think if you're saying one player, and I almost would kind of agree with you at this point, but if you're saying one player from those 6, doesn't it automatically become Jaylen Brown or Drew Holiday if you are looking to duck the second apron? Or do you think they're more likely to say, we'll move one of those other guys and then we'll figure out how to duck the second apron in advance of the deadline or next year's draft?
I would assume it's Jaylen Brown. For another reason as well. He's got a great reputation. He won the Finals MVP last year. But I think it's fair. Dan, to say that he did not have a good year, like whatsoever. I think it's fair to say that even though he did win the Finals MVP last year, the totality of last season wasn't fantastic either. Like, there are some elements to his game where I think the Celtics can like look at him and go, is he somewhat expendable? Like, can we manage without him to a certain extent? To which the answer, in my opinion, is probably yeah. I mean, you can scale up some of the roles for someone else. Like, I don't think they have next season specifically in mind to, oh, we're going to compete for a championship. No, I think they know what kind of situation they're in. But when Jason Tatum returns, he's going to be the primary scorer, maybe even facilitator. We'll see like what kind of standard he's going to be in. But Porzingis, if he's still around, he can get you buckets. He can get you a lot of numbers. Derek White, you can scale his role up. Peyton Pritchard has proven you certainly can scale his role up. I'll even be willing to say that I'm not out on Sam Hauser being able to play more minutes and just be more of an offensive factor. Now, are they going to have a team where their top 8 or 9 guys are all like elite two-way players? No. But that was always, to a certain extent at least, somewhat unrealistic that they could hang their hat on that and then just say, oh, for the next 10 years, we're just like the alpha omega two-way team in the NBA. No, because that two-way guys cost a lot of money, which is very evident when you look at their cap sheet. Something has to give, and it probably has to give right now.
Yeah, I honestly don't know where I land on that because it's so I get everything you're saying about Jaylen Brown and scaling people up, but when you're dealing on with the timeline horizon you are now and trying to see what Jason Tatum is, if he comes back and he is anything less than he was before, that's where Jaylen Brown becomes super important. And if you don't have him, are you just finding with a draft pick or a diamond in the rough someone who can make up that gap over the next 2 years? Maybe. I'm also curious as to, we're talking about contracts, but I don't know how favorably that's going to be viewed around the league. I think this season I'm willing to give him somewhat of a pass just because I know he was dealing with the knee stuff. But like he's not old, but he's not getting younger. And like that contract he's on the Supermax. So like that's gonna have to be that'll be a consideration for other teams. So I think if he's put on the market, I absolutely think teams like Houston, Portland, you get teams from like kind of all phases of their development. Well, absolutely, maybe even the Spurs don't love him there. I mean, anyone's a good fit next to Wemby, but like if you're just with the spacing issues with Fox and maybe Castle and or Harper there, I think there'd be a market. Maybe even Sacramento would be willing to give up a ton for him. I just don't. I need to see the offer, but then you're also getting like you're not going to save. I mean, you're probably not going to save the $25+ million in one deal unless he's going to the Nets. So like, how many teams are involved? What are the subsequent transactions? I'd be very curious though to see what the market is, because I do think I tend to lean with you that if they view this as more than a 1-year project, I would just trade Jaylen Brown.
Right. If they could somehow turn Jaylen Brown into Zach LaVine, that would be interesting.
What does that serve? So you're only saving like, let's just say $10 million or whatever, not even that next year. Like,
right.
What is that?
That's the thing. So that would be the step one, right? Like, because if you go that route and you say, oh, we bring in another high price guy, you'll probably be looking at making additional moves. But at the very least, LaVine, who can play off of better players, let's just call it what it is. Him and Tatum, I think, would be a more cleaner fit, especially with the 3-point focus in Boston as well. So like you can argue, do we want to take the $10 million less per year, which by the way does have dramatic luxury tax implications. So like you do shave those off for a potentially better fit for Jason Tatum. And then you go, okay, we found a cheaper alternative to be like the quote unquote number 2 guy. Now it's time to see if we can shed ourselves from other contracts. And that's when Drew Holiday, you shop him around like you're a maniac. Although, again, who's going to take that deal? I have no clue.
I honestly, if I was Dallas, I would take a look. Like if it's Gafford plus what's the second form of outgoing money. I think I think PJ Washington's probably viewed as more of an asset than Drew Holiday, especially at his salary and he's expiring. But that would be a team that I think Drew Holiday makes a lot of sense. Coming, first of all, imagine a defense that has him, Davis, and Cooper Flagg on it. Just insane. Derek Lively as well. And then he can help with the ball handling responsibilities until Kyrie gets back, and he fits with
Right.
Kyrie when he comes back. But again, that might be a situation where you're giving Dallas a first round pick to do that. You probably have to.
I mean, it's Nico Harrison, so who knows?
Also true. I've been trying to think of Jaylen Brown destinations. Memphis, like they have stuff now, and like they could cobble together salary. They have Cole Anthony, Caldwell Pope, and then if you want, like, would they give up a Jalen Wells? Like you talk about getting a player who's super cheap and could help
Do we
replace.
even know what Memphis is trying to do? Like,
No,
it feels like there's another shoe to drop, and we don't know what that shoe is.
So I don't think they're trying to rebuild unless Jaren Jackson Jr. says I'm not extending with you. But
Right.
that being said, they did just trade an expensive Desmond Bane. I don't think they're going to try and go get a more expensive Jalen Brown. So that's why
That's
I
the
ruled
thing.
them out.
Yeah, like I'm not putting it besides them to like actually pivot off of John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. this summer. Like, I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but I don't think any door is closed in Memphis because let's be real. Let's just be real. And I know we're talking about Boston, but what is ultimately your ceiling with John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr.?
I think who made this parallel? I can't even remember. And I want to give him credit for it. But like the Grizzlies feel like they just decided to be the Magic pre Desmond Bane trade,
Right.
where it's sort of like good, but like not really going to contend for anything special.
You have a point guard who can't shoot and a big man who can't rebound. That's great, man. Great starting point.
Man, the Grizzlies fans in the YouTube comments were not happy with your thoughts on Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't know I guess we did the Southwest.
Oh, I'm critical of him.
yeah.
I'm critical of him. I really am. But he, like,
If he's going to get the max, which it seems like
Yeah.
the other thing this is not a Grizzlies pod, but it seems like they're prepared to dump more money so that they can give him a raise. They don't have to give him technically until
Correct.
next summer. So yeah, you should be critical of him. Do you know what a team, and there'd have to be a third team configuration here, but the basis of this money, and it's not going to save Boston anything, like at least not a boatload. They'd have to send out another contract in addition to Jaylen Brown. What about some type of construction with Miami where it's Tyler Hero, Wiggins stuff for Jaylen Brown, contract X?
that's interesting because then you split him into those two deals that you can kind of move individually. And, like, obviously, Miami gets the better player, and that's a team that is notorious for not wanting to tank. I can get behind that. That's fun, at the least. I mean, does it make Miami significantly better? I have my doubts.
I would look. Excuse me. I think if you keep Tyler Hero in a trade for Kevin Durant, which they should absolutely be trying to do, I really don't even know like how much better that makes Miami, and you're shortening your window to like 2 seasons or whatever it is. So at least with Jaylen Brown and Bam Adebayo, and I'm assuming you could probably get, maybe you can't keep Khalil Ware, but like your window is just a little bit more open. But Miami just seems impulsive enough to do that. I wouldn't do it if I'm them because, okay, Bam and Jaylen Brown, excellent. What the hell are you left with?
Exactly.
So that would be my concern.
Yeah.
Any other Jaylen Brown? I do think if Derek White's available, I see some people say like they might be able to get 2 first-round picks for him. I think they get 3 if they make him available. At least the equivalent, like a player and 2 picks or
right,
something.
like a player who's worth a first. Yeah. Maybe that's also like the card that they have to play, right? Because if you can actually get, let's think, an expiring contract that's worth a little less than the 28.1 he's earning right now, and then the picks. And if you then make some additional moves, like where you shave off a couple millions for guys going out, I mean, I think I need a target. Like how much lower do the Boston ownership want payroll to be? Like how many millions do they want to shave off? Because in this offseason, it's not going to be easy. No one has money.
No, your best bet is just like, so we know the new salary matching rules for teams below the first apron. They're just more flexible. So when you're dealing in the Derek White range, I actually thought it was $7.5 million more you could take in. I think one of my editors just messaged me saying it was 8.5 now. So I mean, if that's true, it's like, let's use Houston as an example. If they wanted Derek White, he's making, what is he, 27.5 next year. It's like you could take back $19 million in money. And so maybe that's is it a sign and trade with Fred VanVleet? Like they're giving you other stuff. And Fred VanVleet's like, decide maybe he commands more than 19 million though, so that might be a bad example. But like if you can make a deal with a team and they only have to give you $19 million, like okay, you've only saved $8.5 million from there, but now you have this smaller contract. Can you move that for someone who's even cheaper?
Exactly.
Like there could be a massive trickle down effect for that.
Yeah.
Anything else on these Celtics? But I think though that's like it's kind of a one question with a bunch of different layers to it for them.
Yep. No, I think we're good.
What do you have to say about the Brooklyn Nets?
Well, so I want them to go back to their trolling days. Remember when they handed out offer sheets to virtually every restricted free agent under the sun?
Let's see how many we can name. Otto Porter, Alan
Crabbe,
Tyler Johnson.
There we go. Tyler Johnson. That was the one I was thinking about as well. I just couldn't place the name. Thank you. They did someone else, right?
I can't remember. But they did. Those were three like really big ones.
Those
like remember
great troll jobs.
Right, great troll jobs. Right, kind of like with, and then Danny Ainge followed suit in Utah with that Paul Reed offer sheet 2 years ago.
That's fun. That is good. I mean, look, why not? When you're the only team with money, why the fuck not?
I have an answer to that.
Okay.
Because when you look at the restricted free agency market, I feel like there's a pretty good chance the Nets would win whatever bid they put in. And so it's like that eBay thing where it's you better put in a max bid that you're prepared to pay, otherwise you're going to be stuck with Josh Giddey at $120 million.
Oh no, they wouldn't be that dumb. They wouldn't be that dumb.
Well, who's the restricted? Okay, go ahead. You have
Jonathan Kuminga. Like at least there's some interesting, upside there. I think you and I agree. He hasn't exactly been in the right system for a while now. Like there hasn't been a lot of faith in him. And like that's not to put everything at the feet of Steve Kerr and the coaching staff there. He also obviously has some responsibility in how his development has somewhat stagnated. But there is talent there, considerable talent. I think we can agree on that. Like he's very productive on a permanent basis. Would it be that egregious if they handed him an offer sheet in the mid to late 20s and
like 4 for 100? You're thinking
how much?
4 for 100.
Oh, I wouldn't hate that.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about them too is it's kind of the Ace Bailey conversation where it's you can put this player on the Nets and you know they're going to get the ball. And I think Jonathan Kuminga very much needs the ball on offense to just actualize like the best version of himself, and then maybe he can flesh out the complementary parts of his game a little bit more from there. Right. So I think I'd be comfortable with them doing that.
And, like, you're really forcing Golden State to make a call there.
Right. Because it's like, with them, you have to think about what they're paying Draymond and Steph and Jimmy Butler, and then you can say, all right, it makes sense to preserve the asset, but you better believe as Golden State, where Jonathan Kuminga's role is going to be different, but you better believe that his trade value at least sustains, because I'll say this. I think if he's on the books for 4 for 100, there's a very good chance that deal looks a lot better if he's a member of the Nets versus if he's a member of the Warriors, just because of the gap in what his roles would look like.
And technically, there would be money left to troll another team afterwards.
But like, who are the like? You want to troll the Grizzlies for Santi Aldama? Who are the RFAs
how the
that you
fuck
guys...
did you know I was going there?
Well, because there's not a lot of free RFAs like that are really worth something this year.
I love that. No, but like I love that was the guy immediately. That was
I love me some Santi. So
same. That and look, he can play the center spot. I don't hate that. Kuminga at the 4, Aldama at the 5. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, good luck getting stops and rebounds, but sure.
Look, it's fun. You can run all night long.
Jordy Fernandez will figure it out. I have confidence in him.
Right, exactly.
They could be, if they wanted to, they could be just that scenario that you mapped out. I might just fuck around and say, all right, we'll play Cam Johnson, Claxton, Aldama, and Kuminga all at once.
Why not?
Think about how huge that lineup would be.
Spacing? What the hell? Never mind. Yeah.
Well, in theory, 3 of those 4 shoot. Like Nick Claxton's the only one that wouldn't take like jumpers. So
that's true. Kuminga will shoot. Question is,
if it's preseason, they might go in too. So
that's
think about
that. No, but like I just want them to go out there and troll the everlasting shit out of teams. Absolutely.
And you could, in theory, do the same in unrestricted free agency, to where I think agents do this a lot, where they might say that the Nets are registering interest in just gonna like a Trey Jones, like to try and
Right.
drive up his market. But like the Nets could really show interest in somebody and be like, well, what can we force this team to pay for so and so? Like it doesn't necessarily have to be just RFAs, in large part because that market is just so depleted right now.
I'd be shocked if they put an offer in for Kitty, though. I'd be absolutely floored.
Well, because they'd be worried that they'd win it. But it's also the Bulls.
Yeah.
And really, first of all, you don't need to troll the Bulls because they troll themselves.
Exactly. Like you won't even have to worry. They're just like, no, we want the Bulls to have a high payroll, but you know what? They're going to figure that out themselves. It's fine.
If you're the Nets, would you consider, just because of the Kuminga discussion, like if you get the sense that Golden State is going to match, do you value Kuminga enough to where you might want to engage in a sign and trade talk with Golden State rather than go the offer sheet route and say, I mean, giving up Cam Johnson seems steep for a player that you could in theory pay outright, but maybe there's something with, they have a bunch of those late first rounders, 2 in the 20s, the bottom 5.
So what you're really asking me is, would I be willing, if I'm the Brooklyn Nets,
to give up a late first round pick or maybe 2 late first round picks, in the 20s? They'd be this year's picks. I'm not giving future picks. Would you be willing to do that
me
to
having
make
the
sure
option to pay them outright instead?
Well, it's you versus giving him an offer sheet and maybe just not getting it. Like, I'm asking, is your interest in Kuminga purely rooted in, we just want to troll with Golden State, and if they don't match it, we'll take Kuminga? Or is it you're actually interested in Jonathan Kuminga?
Oh, I think he could be interested, but like you could two things can be true at the same time. You control the everlasting shit out of them, but still want him, where you're like, hey, look, we're willing to go up to a certain level. We're betting that the Warriors aren't, and we're going to take it from there. If we lose Kuminga, okay, that's a tough thing, but like we can go in a different direction. We can pivot. We can go to Santi Aldama instead. We can go to a different player out of position, Quentin Grimes, for example, who also, by the way, just to troll the Sixers.
Oh, that would be a very interesting one.
I wouldn't hate that. I wouldn't hate Quentin Grimes there.
Do you know what 2 names I would find, Fat? Just the teams that you would be trolling. That's why I find it interesting. Brook Lopez, just to see if Milwaukee, like how high is Milwaukee? Like they keep saying they're going to be aggressive and they have all this flexibility. Let's test that. And then the other guy who's actually a pretty good fit for the roster, just given his age and the stuff he does, Naz Reid has that player option.
Oh, that's
would be
fun.
Just like you put those feelers out there and be like, no, we'll give him 25, Minnesota.
Yeah.
You gonna match?
That's interesting. I like that one. Naz Reid would be fun there. A spacing center. And like
could play with Claxton if you really wanted him to.
Could also overtake the position when they inevitably sent Nick Claxton to the Lakers. Yeah.
I don't mind the Lakers as a destination for him.
No, me neither. That makes sense.
My question for them, it kind of steps on it. It's like the opposite of, are they actually going to be in the business of, whether it's by trade or free agency, signing or taking on players with multiple years left on their contracts, or are they going to look to conserve space for the deadline and next summer? And I say the deadline because that would be a real market inefficiency, is if, we know they have to hit the salary floor now, but like if you have cap space, like any flexibility whatsoever around the deadline, like that's a huge market inefficiency because no other team is going to have that. I think in Brooklyn's case, they have the ability, like if they just said, we don't want to pay Cam Thomas, they can get like $80 million in cap space, basically, like without blinking an eye. So you could just split the baby and do both. Like, we're going to give out like $40 million and then like we're going to, because you have to hit the salary floor anyway. But I'm just curious because they very clearly didn't take on any multi-year salaries through this trade deadline when you look at the Dennis Schroeder trades and the Dorian Finney-Smith trades. And so it just had me wondering, as they're kind of going through what people assume is more of an accelerated reboot because they don't own their 2027 pick, might they just be open or actively trying to still be this flexible or comparably flexible next summer?
Really good question. I think right now they have so many pathways they can go where I think they can pretty much afford to play everything by ear. And they know that if option A doesn't work out, okay, we can pivot. Like this team has so many pivot ways that teams that are capped out just don't have. Like, do I think they've talked about this? Absolutely. Do I also think they've talked about becoming like a rental team? Like, oh yeah, we'll take on this shitty contract for, draft pick compensation. Absolutely. I think there are so many avenues that they have open that I wouldn't close the door on trade deadline flexibility, especially if the trade deadline is basically going to be the new free agency / pre-agency. Yeah, like why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't they?
I was also curious if they would do if there's an opportunistic, not a Giannis situation, but if there's a star or a fringe star that becomes available that's not going to command as like isn't going to get the Donovan Mitchell or even like necessarily the Desmond Bain special.
Right.
Like let's use Trae Young as an example. I'd be very curious to see what Trae Young would get. Like after what Desmond Bain got from the Magic, but it feels like Trae Young might actually net less for the Hawks. Like would the Knicks swoop in and say this is just too good in terms of an asset
Yeah.
for player coming back thing to where, yeah, we'll burn some of our flexibility just to have this player in house. And then maybe at the trade deadline or next summer, when another star becomes available, you have an infrastructure built around one star that might attract another and allow you to make that call after having, integrating 2 higher lottery picks.
I mean, look, when you're really looking at how some teams are built, some teams, especially smaller market teams, are identifying players who are undervalued in the sense that they might not have a lot of trade value. They might not be, tier 1 stars, but you can get them for fairly cheap, and then you get it. You take a gamble on it. A team that comes to mind here are the Pacers. Like when they traded for Tyrese Halliburton, I don't think anyone saw this, right? But and they gave up Domantas Sabonis, which yes, that's a big chip to give up, but obviously they got the better end of the deal there with Siakam, who, if memory serves, he was also bound to be a free agent, so they knew going into those negotiations, Toronto didn't really have a whole lot of arguments working for him because how can you ask for the moon for a guy who's about to be a free agent, right? That just doesn't track. So like smart teams will always find a way to get multiple good players / star adjacent players or even stars in while their value is pretty low. I assume that the Nets are going to try to take a similar approach because they can't absorb a ton of money. They do have picks they can send out. Like they have quality contracts on their books that are also very, very movable. And hell, they can even get more draft picks if they want to. Like if a team comes in and says, well, we want A, B, and C, and the Nets right now only have A and B, they can probably get C by trading Cameron Johnson. So I'm just with the Nets, I'm just at this point where the world's their oyster. They can do whatever the fuck they want. And the next 12 months are going to be so goddamn crucial to the long-term foundation that they are going to be building.
The final thing I just wanted to close on them with, are there any players, and I'll actually throw out a few names to you, like let's just say teams are either looking to facilitate other trades by sending in salary or just, in Boston's case, they're trying to cut salary. I want to throw some names at you, and if you're the Nets, would you just take these guys, no asset required?
Okay.
Drew Holiday.
No, I need an asset.
Kristaps Porzingis.
I'll take him.
Michael Porter Jr.
Okay, I gotta have to look up how much he's got left. I don't think it's that many years, right? Like
he has the 2 left now. So he has this
yeah.
upcoming season and the following
You
one.
know
It's like
what?
2 years and 70 something.
I'll take a gamble on Michael Porter Jr. But
2 years and 80. Sorry, I was like 2 years and 78.
But like,
79.
okay, what's my motivation here? Because like, is Denver just calling me up and asking me to take him?
Well, I think in that scenario, like with Boston, they might just want to. They're fine, maybe getting off KP. But with Denver, it's we're trying to pull off another trade, but the team doesn't want Michael Porter Jr.
Right. So yeah, so it's got to be like a 3-team. Like they are going to be a part of a 3-teamer.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. Sean Marks is too smart to just say, okie dokie, I'll help you guys out. Like,
I'm just asking in theory. Like, because if you
Okay.
say, like, oh, no, they would take him, then it's okay. They might need to send out their 2032 second. Like, it wouldn't be
Right.
a sweetener that's crazy.
Okay, that way. Now I get it because every team has to touch. All right. Yeah. No, I will probably take a swing on him. Yes.
Josh Hart.
Yeah. Yeah. Why not? He's like earning nothing compared to what he does.
I think we're not really going to touch on it with the Knicks, but that would be like if they were actually interested in Josh Hart, that would be a vehicle for the Knicks to think like, hey, we can save Team X a bunch of money if the Nets were willing just to take on Josh Hart and the Knicks were sending out swaps.
20 million?
He's not. I don't think he's a bad contract, but he's not like he's maybe a culture setter, but he's not like if you're the Nets and you're rebuilding, Josh Hart doesn't do much for you. Is my
No,
point.
he doesn't. But like I'm getting a guy in who takes up what 13% of the cap, and who's like a star in his role, who's like great in the locker room, who gives me so much more, and I can probably ship him out for like a couple of firsts after half a season. Yeah, I do that.
Grayson Allen.
No, there are limits. There are limits, man.
Oh, that was good. I don't even want to go on. I think I'm just gonna stop there. RJ Barrett. I am gonna keep going.
Yeah, I would do that.
Keldon Johnson.
You know what? If you had asked me a year ago, or hell, just 7 months ago, I probably would have said no. But I spent some time around the team in Paris, and that dude, from a locker room perspective, is just fantastic. His level of enthusiasm and positivity and buy-in, yes, absolutely.
Cole Anthony.
Yes, same. Everything I just said about Kelton applies to Cole Anthony too. Great dude, great for the locker room. I think he's fairly cheap. He's been underutilized a great ton. Yes, no hesitation.
Contavious Caldwell-Pope.
No, sir.
You need an asset, is what you're saying.
Oh,
You're not
absolutely.
yeah, okay. Here's an interesting one because I wonder if you could guess the name, but because of his injury, he in theory fits a timeline where the Nets want to be bad next year, but want to be good in 2026, 2027.
Wow, Jason Tatum?
No, I would need a few assets, I think. DeJounte Murray.
Oh, I hate that we've come to this, but I would want assets.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, it's a major injury. I love him. I really do think people have the wrong idea of him as a player. He was so criticized in Atlanta, and I'm just not sure why. I like that situation didn't turn out to be as beneficial to him or the Hawks as they both sides, I think, imagined. But I think he took so much crap for a variety of reasons that I don't really see being real at any stage. I think he's a formidable player, but the injury situation is just, it scares the bejesus out of me. So I have to ask for an asset. Absolutely.
So that would be the one that I think so far is the only one we disagree on, is I would just take him because I think that the extension's reasonable enough that I can roll the dice.
It is. I understand where that's coming from, but like, imagine if that's an injury that just lingers for years.
And he has an ACL in his rear view too. Yeah,
correct.
For sure.
Yeah.
The last couple names here, Dylan Brooks.
Without an asset, yeah, that's $22 million a year, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a player
not bad.
Houston's not looking to dump. It's just as part of
Yeah.
another trade.
No,
Now
that's fine.
Here's this one, Jalen Green.
He's so young. Yeah, I'll swing if I'm the Nets.
I would do it and either hope that Cam Thomas is really cheap or I'm just letting him walk.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then my final, I guess two, just because Miami would do some weird shit. Duncan Robinson, expiring at about 20 if he's fully guaranteed.
Yeah. You can flip him later. Yeah.
What about Andrew Wiggins?
Andrew Wiggins is the type of player who is too good not to just grab him. Like if I'm willing to take on Michael Porter Jr. for nothing, I'm absolutely willing to take on Andrew Wiggins for nothing.
I think there could be some real opportunity for the Nets to do. Andrew Wiggins probably feels on like the super high end of that. My point with that exercise was I actually think that there might be some opportunities for the Nets to like make out like bandits on the trade market.
Right.
Not just talking about prospects and draft equity, but these guys that they either keep around or they could reflip for something else.
Yep. Same. I think that's a marvelous plan, honestly, because, you know, if teams are desperate enough to dump guys in the pursuit of greater endeavors, you should be standing right under them, being willing to grab whatever you can, because you know those guys aren't worthless. You can, like you said, you can turn around almost immediately if you want to and say, hey, now we have Andrew Wiggins. Come get him, Boston, or whoever.
I'm still just dying, mostly on the inside at this point, at your reaction to Grayson Allen.
Look, man.
Look, I get it. Like the extension seemed like it was fun, but it was just like not the deal that you kind of feel. All right, it's like 3 years and what, like $65 million or something, or it's not. Excuse me, $55 million left, whatever it is. So it just wasn't the deal that I would expected that reaction from.
No, I mean it's not a big deal. He's almost 30. I don't think he's a good shooter. I will give him that. Does he move the needle at all for anyone ever?
I think it's like the one season in Phoenix, he certainly could have. But I think I'm trying to think. He might be a touch overpaid, but I think is like kind of a shooter, and then as someone who could make there was some. It wasn't so much last year, but the season before, I thought he played a lot better. Like maybe the best defense of his career there. So I think he could be a needle mover, but he's not a substantial one. And if you could get rather 1 year of Duncan Robinson as opposed to 3 years of Grayson Allen, yes, I clearly prefer. Now, an interesting discussion would be: would you rather have Grayson Allen at 3-55 or Michael Porter at 2-80? Be interesting discussion, but
I'll lean size there always.
The Knicks, Mort, what's your question?
I mean, it's the obvious question, right? How do they acquire depth? We know that they have a starting lineup that all played over 35 minutes per game under Tibbs. So, like, that problem is probably going to solve itself now that Tibbs is no longer there. But that said, they don't really have a lot of quality coming off the bench. Like, Mitch is there, sure. Miles McBride is there, fine. Cameron Payne,
free agent. Landry Shamet, free agent. Delon Wright, free agent. If you believe the Knicks have, I'm not saying Tibbs was perfect, I want to make clear, but if you believe that the Knicks already have answers on their roster, like to expand the rotation, I question that logic. I think Shamet could have helped them more. One, he was injured for a lot of the season. He proved he had some, but like, I think you're basically saying no. Like Tibbs should have figured out a way to play Pacome Dadier or Tyler Kolek, and they deserved more developmental reps. Which that's probably worth a discussion. But yeah, your question is, I think, completely on point.
Yeah. To the point of Pacome Dadier, right? I do think it's inexcusable that he only got 111 minutes on the year. Like I understand. I mean, look, I get it, but you have to invest a certain amount of minutes to a first round draft pick. Otherwise, it's just a waste. Why even bother making the selection then? That's what I want to know. Like, he was the 25th overall selection. Are we going to sit here and pretend like the Knicks couldn't have gotten something interesting for the 25th pick last year?
Look at some of the play. Wasn't there a couple guys? Like, let's look at some of the guys that were drafted after him. Like, couldn't you have picked it? But again, what it comes down to, though, is even if you're looking at so-and-so and saying, oh, the Knicks could have had him, you've kind of touched on it where it's, would they have played him?
Oh, no. I'm not saying other. Oh, sorry. I didn't flesh that out well. When I say other players, I don't mean draft prospects. I mean, you could have traded the 25th selection for a veteran, right? Like, you could have packaged that with some type of contract, and you could have probably gotten someone else in there who would have been a rotation player. So, but the Knicks opted, to keep that pick. Well, and I'm sure there would have been some interest because a first-round draft pick that also comes with 4 years of team control. That is interesting for a lot of teams, even if the 24 draft was pretty shitty. So the Knicks said to themselves, we are going to prioritize keeping the 25th selection and we're going to use it for absolutely fucking nothing.
Yeah, and that's look, part of it is just if you were going to trade it for a rotation player because of the whole like Mikal Bridges trade, like they were operating on fine apron lines. But what you could have done is could you have traded number 25 in 2024 for another pick in 2025 when you really need cost control, or even further down the road? Yeah, they could have definitely done something like that. But hey, maybe whoever they hire as the next head coach comes in and decides that Dottier is going to play more. And I think fans were probably more peeved that Tyler Kolek didn't get more run.
Yep.
But it's tough when you're supposed to be a contender. And you and I talked about this on a previous pod. The Knicks also, relative to a lot of other contenders, didn't play a lot of low leverage or medium leverage minutes, which is PBP Stats has this thing where those are the minutes that influence the outcomes the least. And so in theory, it's not just garbage time. I want to make that clear. But in theory, like those are the minutes that you could get away with developmental reps. And I think the Knicks were in the bottom 10 in the league in the number of combined low and medium leverage minutes played.
Yeah,
My question is...
Yeah, go ahead. I was about to complain that they didn't use Marshawn Beauchamp enough either. Like, I was just upset. I'm just upset at how the Knicks went about this.
So I have many questions for this team, and my biggest question is, can they convince Al Horford to sign for the mini MLE? Because I want him there so badly. But my actual question, to extend or not to extend, Mort. So I'm going to throw a couple. We're going to go through this player by player, and we tackled this in their season look ahead, but this will be a nice digestible for people who don't like to listen to the single team stuff. Karl-Anthony Towns is eligible for a 2-year, $150 million extension that would bring his total to 5 years and like $320+ million.
So an extension can be for less than that as well.
You are, and I think what you're hitting on is interesting, is what they could also do. I just don't want to like throw too much at subscribe listeners, whatever. If you could get him to decline that $61 million player option he has and sign a 3-year extension that is worth less on average than he's making now, that gets interesting because you got to plan around getting more expensive with, we're going to talk about Bridges in a second. Jalen Brunson signed a team-friendly deal, but when you combine him with OG Anunoby and Towns, like it starts to add up.
If I can get Towns back on a 3-year extension at the fun max number, 25% of the cap, I'm hitting that immediately.
Ooh, does Towns consider the fun max?
No, that's, again, I don't think he does. That's what I'm saying, like what I would do. I would, because, like, again, why would I give him 30 or 35% of the max, which would kick in 2 years from now when he's going to be, what, 32? 31? 32, 31, right?
32, I think. Yeah.
32, God, no.
Although, actually, you're not, I'm looking at this. So when the extension would kick in, the 25% max number is over $50 million. And so I'd initially thought, I know he's eligible for 2 and 150, but if you're Towns and his reps, you do have to look at this through the lens of the new CBA. Correct. I don't think that Towns in 3 years is going to be a no-brainer max candidate on the open market. And so if you offer him 3 for 150 rather than 2 for 150, which kind of aligns with the fun max, like you're saying, it's a little bit less actually, which is kind of wild. You've now shaved, if it's flat, you've saved $11 million a season, which is it's not the non-tax, but like that's additional wiggle room to like either sustain this core and make it easier to make other transactions. And that feels like the number, I'll say that feels like the hypothetical where if I'm the Knicks, I am thinking about an extension. Otherwise, we can deal with this next summer, correct. If at all.
Yeah. I look, if you go get him for 3 years, 150, and like you said, keep the salary like consistently flat over the course of 3 years, remember this, the cap is going to increase by 10%. So like that cap percentage is going to get lower and lower and lower. And that is, I think it's going to be one of the main priorities for every single team moving forward in trying to like align the cap, because I think like we shit on the Bulls a ton, and like, again, the Patrick Williams contract is horrible, but I do like the fact that they kept it flat. And I do like the fact that you kind of know what you're dealing with down the line. you're saying, okay, this player is getting the same level of compensation 3 or 4 years from now, and we know the cap is going to increase. So, like, that actually gives us necessary wiggle room when it comes to that. That same logic can be applied to Towns easily. And by the time he's 32 anyway, yeah, you can probably get away with the fun max, right?
I honestly don't know. I'd just be curious. I don't even know that I might even on the Knicks. I might want it to be lower than that, like 3 for 140 or something, or 130, and that probably gets you in the territory where he probably says no, like forget that. But that's the only.
Who else is out there? That you also have to consider. Like, I love Towns personally, but I also concede that his archetype is not exactly attractive to teams anymore. Like, this is a scoring center who doesn't defend at a great level, and we know in today's NBA, defensive centers really start everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he has to be so overwhelmingly efficient and effective offensively for anyone to say, oh, okay, we'll sacrifice the defense. And we keep talking about Towns kind of floating in and out of games. Like, sure, if Towns within the next 2 years has what I think he's capable of, which is like a hyper-efficient 30-point season, then we can talk. But if he's still like floating in and out, he's still not a defensive presence, I think you have every advantage in the book if you're New York.
I don't even know if I would do the 3 for 150 thing, just because I'm not sure for all the reasons you outlaid. I just don't even know like what he's going to be. Like, I'm waiting another, because they need to figure out whether they view him as a center or a power forward before I think they extend him. This next candidate though, Mikal Bridges is eligible for a 4-year, $156.2 million extension. I've seen a lot before I throw it to you of people saying that's too much. And I just strongly disagree, because as of right now, this is according to Spotrac, he would be if you give him that extension, when it kicks in 26-27, he would be about the 45th highest paid player in the NBA. And if you don't think that Mikal Bridges is a top 50 player in the NBA, then you need to have like other sorts of discussions. And the problem too is that, so if he goes on the open market, forget about the max that the Knicks could give him. It's more just because of the 8% raises versus 5. But he'd be looking at, if another team wanted to max him out next summer, he could get up to 4 years and $219.4 million. I don't know if a team will give that to him, but I would bet that there would be a 4-year, $200 million offer on the table for him, because there's going to be more cap space, and there's a chance when you go through the list of free agents next summer, there's probably like 10 or 12 or even 15 guys in front of him. Some of those are quote unquote restricted free agents that probably won't ever reach the open market. And then a bunch of those other guys, they either have player options for this summer and they could just get new deals, or they're extension eligible themselves. There's a chance that like Mikal Bridges becomes one of the most sought after 2 or 3 free agents in the NBA next summer. And so I think people are starting to overthink Mikal Bridges. And if he's willing to sign that extension, which I believe he would, because I really do believe that was part of the calculus when the Knicks gave up so many draft picks for him, was it was twofold. 1, we're not giving up any players of consequence. And 2, he's going to sign this extension that is very manageable, even if you don't think it's a bargain. Where do you land on that?
Could you give me the contract number again? 4 years and how many?
156 about.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not even 20% of the cap.
No, absolutely. That I'm not worried about. Like, if it's exclusively like an extension scenario where you are limited to 140% of the cap, or 140% of your latest salary number, yeah, you lock that up immediately, because he is so like compensated at such a low rate right now that, yeah, you do that in a heartbeat. Now, I will say this, and this isn't really tied into his contract, because again, if he signs that extension number, that's perfect. But in terms of his longevity, right? Like, he's been available for practically every single, like, has he ever missed a game? Did he miss in the second year? I don't remember how it is, but like, he's an Iron Man. Like, he plays so many games and he plays so many minutes. Are we worried that he's about to Luol Deng himself a little bit, where when that 1 year where the body starts to just break down a little bit, it begins an avalanche of stuff.
Well, first, to your point, he's not only has he never missed a game but he's actually played in 83 games in the Phoenix Brooklyn season, which is like the most Mikal Bridges stat of all time. Completely. He played in 83 of 82 games. I find myself thinking the same way too, to where it's when something doesn't happen for so long, especially when it's a run of quote unquote good luck or durability. Mm-hmm. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop of, okay, yeah. I think what does help him is that he really hasn't been in a quote unquote overused player until like the past couple years. And honestly, it's last year. Is it maybe that the year that he had the trade, he ended up logging almost 36 minutes a game because of how much he played in Phoenix beforehand. But like this year at 37 minutes per game with the Knicks, like you really could make the case that there's only been one season where his workload was just way too heavy.
I think that's fair. That's a good point. So like if a new coach comes in and he might be scaled back to like 32, maybe even 30, I would feel better about that for sure. Yeah.
They're kind of in a situation though where even if you don't feel comfortable with 156, like you're so pot committed to him, you have to, if he's willing.
Oh no, the extension number, it's fine. Yeah. No, I'm giving him that immediately. It's more along the lines of if he wants to hit the open market, then I'm scared shitless.
Now this extension candidate, we actually didn't talk about him in the Knicks offseason look ahead. I don't know why I glossed over that. Mitchell Robinson, probably a popular trade candidate, $13 million expiring salary. He can extend for 4 years and up to $81.3 million. Again, this is just the max. It doesn't have to be that number. For reference, though, his salary in year one, if they offered him the full freight, he would be about the 15th to 16th highest paid center in the league as of right now. Now, that number might actually, he'd probably go lower because, like, does Brook Lopez get a 2-year deal that's worth more than that? Miles Turner, I assume, will get more than that. Naz Reid, I assume, will get more than that. So, but between the 15th and 20th highest paid center in the NBA, we can talk about different types of number structures for him. Maybe it's, give him the max in year one, but then have it decline down, kind of like you did in this current deal. But if you're the Knicks, are you extending him, or do you think he's more valuable to them as a trade asset when considering the injury history and the minutes load that he is able to ferry?
Yeah, like let's get into the injury history. That's a situation where I just don't feel comfortable at all handing out a long-term contract at the very least. I'm not giving him 4 years. Am I giving him 3 and then with a team option?
Well, what if it's 4 and like, I don't think he would sign for 4 and 60 again. Maybe he would. Like you wouldn't do 4 and 60? It runs through his age 31 season?
Well, that wasn't the scenario. So, but like if that's in the scenario where it's like the old Ben Wallace contract, like $15 million a year. Yeah.
So can I ask you, what's the number then, like per year that like his max extension would pay him, let's say an average annual value of 20. Is it like, 16, 7? Like if you went 4 for 70, does that just feel a lot better to you? Or
I think an even 15 feels like that's about as much as I can probably swallow. I mean, because again, 59, 31, 17. Those are games played over the past 3 seasons.
Yeah.
That's a ton of missed time, man.
And he's never averaged 30 minutes a game, and he's only ever averaged 25 or more minutes per game while playing in 60 or more games once.
Yeah.
And so I think when you're throwing it around as a percentage of the cap, like $15 million per year for someone who I think is definitely a starting quality center in the NBA, whether he does or not, it's a different story. It seems low, but you have to look at how much he's actually playing and how much he's actually available.
Right. And that's why I'm scared of going longer. If this guy was routinely playing 60-plus games per year, I probably feel comfortable with 20 more.
Which is basically the max, yeah. So
right, yeah.
I do think that the number is debatable for sure, but I think that this is someone that they probably need to extend. I just don't know, like, all the concerns we have about him right now, other teams will have the same. So what are you actually getting for his $13 million salary? If anything, he might be more valuable to you down the road at a slightly higher number to match money and with more years left on his deal to a team. And so I actually think Mikal Bridges is probably the most important one to extend just because of all you gave up to get him. But like, I'm extending Mitchell Robinson before I'm extending Karl Anthony Towns without question.
Oh yeah, no question.
We move on to your Philadelphia 76ers. I'm not taking ownership of them. Or Mr. Toporek's Philadelphia 76ers.
I was about to say, you're missing up your NBA podcast co-hosts.
Speaking that is Toporek was the editor that messaged me about I haven't answered him yet about the $8.5 million rule that I apparently missed. So what's your question for the 76ers, Mort?
Are they patient about their woeful salary structure, or are they going to be proactive and actually try to get off some of those big deals? And when I say big deals, I am not referencing Tyrese Maxey. I'm referencing Joel Embiid, Paul George. And I know there are a lot of people who are still very much in their feelings about Joel Embiid, as they should, because he's been the heart of the team for so long. But I don't think we can escape the fact that his contract is now among the worst in the NBA when you consider his injury history, the fact that he's getting older. He's, what are we looking at now? 30, 31. He himself has said that playing back-to-backs are pretty much out of the question, possibly for the rest of his career, which that's not great to hear. So, like, that's bad. Paul George isn't a lot better. I know you're higher on him than I am, but I mean, for some reason, you also think he's about 27 then. I'm worried about his old ass and the fact that he's earning that ton of money. So what are they going to do? Like, are they just going to kind of stand pat and let Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, I guess Quentin Grimes in the third pick or whatever pick they end up drafting, going to have fun in the meantime? Okay, but then what's the upside?
Yeah, I think what's tricky with that is Joel Embiid. I think Paul George is $162.4 million over the next 3 years. Joel Embiid's $248.1 over the next 4.
Yeah.
I don't like. Let's start with Embiid. Is there any team that would like just trade for like even a set? Like, is there any team that wouldn't need assets attached to that deal right now, given the state of his knee?
I'm actually not being facetious. I do think the Bulls would be interesting there. I'm not. You always laugh, but like, this is a team that always talks about like wanting to get the big name guy in, and like now I know lately their new spin is like 10 quality players or whatever, but Embiid is a selling point, and they want butts in seats. Like they have made no secret about the fact that they consider the attending audience, not the viewing audience, as priority number one. Embiid would help them in that regard. So I do think a team like the Bulls that are so rudderless would look at Embiid and go, oh, he's available? Great.
I don't know. They're not going to look at that salary and be like, eh.
I mean, look,
we're talking about Jerry Reinsdorf here.
Yeah, but look, this is a team that just got taken in the post, is probably the right way to say it, by the Sacramento Kings and the San Antonio Spurs again, because they dealt with them before. They knew they could take advantage. Like this is a team that's the first call for many teams outside of that team, going basically, hey, if we want to get off an asset or not an asset, if we're going to get off a bad contract, if we have to dump somewhere, let's call up the Bulls. They're a joke. And for them, I think they would be dead serious about making a play for Embiid. Dead serious.
And if you're the Sixers, you're like, are you looking for assets back for Embiid or just money that's going to come off the books sooner? Okay.
No, if I find a team that's dumb enough to give me assets, yeah, I'm taking it. But if I have a team that calls me and says, we'll take him, no strings attached, we'll just take him, I'm going to ask them if they need me to play for his plane ticket.
Here would be an interesting challenge trade if you're just looking at it through the lens of cap relief. Damian Lillard for Joel Embiid.
Yeah, the Dame contract is shorter. So,
only 1 year left after this. There have to be another team involved, I'm sure, but they're actually very close in money next season. I think Dame makes a little bit less.
If I'm Philly, yeah, I immediately.
Wow. And then Milwaukee's just, hey, we're trying to figure out how to cling to the. If Embiid pans out like him and Giannis as a pairing, that's pretty formidable.
Yeah, of course, but again, what are the odds at this point? Embiid played 19 games this year, and he looked.
Well, I think if you're Milwaukee, you justify it as this guarantees us Giannis for at least another year because he's looking and saying, okay, let's see what happens. And then if he decides to leave,
NBA players have eyes, man.
But my point being, it seems like Giannis wants to be in Milwaukee next year, even without Dame playing. So my point is just, if it hits, you end up with a generational talent that extends Giannis's time in Milwaukee by a factor of years. And if it misses, you're kind of screwed regardless because then Giannis is going to want to leave after next season anyway. So, all right, just suck it up and pay Embiid for the next 3 years while you're rebuilding. I find it tough, just with, especially given who runs the Sixers and Daryl Morey. I just wonder if he would even do that.
Here's another challenge trade. Are you willing to include number 3 to get off the Joel Embiid contract? Let's say it's the Nets. The Nets call them up and they say, look, Nick Claxton, that's the play. Because I don't think, can the Nets actually take on the entirety of
They
Embiid's?
absolutely can. He's at 50 plus million. They could do that.
No Nick Claxton then. Just Joel Embiid, number 3 for future considerations.
I find it tough. No, I don't think you could trade the number 3 pick to use it as a sal because then it's what is your direction thereafter? It's Maxey, and then you still have George, and now you don't have a number 3 pick coming in as Quentin Grimes and Jared McCain. I don't know what, like if it was number 3 and Embiid for number 8, sure. But I don't know if the Nets, you want to take on Embiid's money just for the right to move up 3 spots and get VJ Edgecombe or Ace Bailey, who might be trying to follow you anyway. Like at this point,
right at 8. No, but like, and again, I can respect whatever answer to that question, honestly. Like, I get both approaches where the Sixers might say, no, look, we're just we're forced to have a relationship with this contract for a lot of years. Or like we're giving up assets just to get out of it and like start over. Like whatever path they choose.
What about is it number 3 and Embiid for Cam Johnson and Nick Claxton? So you're not saving money, you're staying competitive. The Nets are getting a number 3 pick, still giving up value.
I mean, yeah. Again, if I'm the Sixers, I hit that so hard.
If I'm the Nets, though, it's kind of like you're having number 3 and number 8 plus the other 3 first you have. It's kind of just like, what is the end game? I guess you can load manage Embiid through next season while you're still rebuilding. That one's a little bit more interesting to me.
I think that's interesting. Yeah, absolutely. For Philly, and I get why Philly fans would be like, "Are you trading Embiid? Why?" I understand it. Like, there's some sentimentality there, which I understand. But let's be honest here.
And by the way, we're kind of going through my question right now, which is what will they do with the number 3 pick? Is it keep it, move down, use it to lop off salary, angle for a blockbuster? Is it a combination of those things to where it's number 3 plus Paul George's salary can actually bring back what? It's not just cap relief, but I think one of the things that's floating around was like number 3 and Paul George to get number 5 from Utah. It's a lot of money for Utah to absorb and then they're going to have to send out salary to make, but that's easy with John Collins and Clarkson and Sexton. But that's a lot of baggage to take on just to move up 2 spots. You would really have to want Ace Bailey or VJ Edgecombe, I think.
If you're the Sixers, would you take Vooch, Zach Collins, and Kevin Huerter for Embiid?
Just that's the trade.
They're all expiring.
Yeah, I absolutely would. Like, that's the cold, callous perspective. Is you could say this is just he's 2 years removed from his MVP. I get it, but at the same time,
right?
When you're already talking about not playing back to backs ever again, yeah, I probably would do that if I'm this. Do I think the actual Sixers would do that? I do not think they would.
No, that's the interesting part because I agree with that. I think the Sixers value Embiid to an extent that we don't call that sentimentality. Call it. We hope that things work out. And that level of optimism, quite frankly, is something I wish I had. Like, I'm very pessimistic about this contract. I'm very pessimistic about his future. I wish I wasn't.
Do you know what would be another interesting trade? He would obviously have to agree to it. The challenge trade would be like how deep are the Suns willing to go? Bradley Beal for Joel Embiid.
Yeah, again, shorter contract. Yeah.
And he's, he actually, for all Bradley Beal is, he's probably going to play more than Embiid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, easy.
By the way, wasn't there? Does Phoenix do this? Wasn't it Paul George and number 3 for Kevin Durant as kind of the framework? If you're Phoenix, is that
I mean, again, I pitched that to you at some point, and you
okay?
called me
That's where I
insane.
heard it then.
Yeah, that you called me insane, and that's fair. I don't think you called me insane.
No,
You're
not
just
not
like,
not the Kevin Durant one. I think you were using like number 3 and Paul George like to Brooklyn, and that was the trade. I thought that was a little.
oh, right,
extreme.
it was. See, I'm glad you caught that because you're absolutely right. That was Paul George. That wasn't Embiid.
I criticize you a lot. The Kevin Durant for number 3 and Paul George. I don't think that would have been one of my criticisms. That one I was I had paused for the Sixers because it's like, so we're worried about the way that Paul George is going to age over the next 3 years. But like, so you're going to give up number 3 so that you can sign Kevin Durant for another 2 years and 122. So like now you're paying him 3 years and $180 million total. So that one makes me think like for next year. Yeah. But like you still, if Embiid doesn't play, I don't know where that leaves you as the Sixers.
I mean, look, Paul George played 41 games. He's not exactly been a pillar of health either. Like
it just feels like in that scenario, you're trading in one problem for like a different one. It'd be if you told me Embiid was going to play in 65 games the next 2 years, I'd do that trade in a heartbeat for Kevin Durant. But like, you're getting older while giving up the number 3 pick, which just seems counterintuitive.
Have you ever like stopped and considered how often we discuss these, let's just say it, older guys who are on these ridiculously large contracts? Once again, teams just fall into that habit of paying old, past prime players a dramatic amount of money, and it's always so predictably stupid.
Yes, and I really do believe, I don't know if it's going to happen this summer, and I think when it's LeBron, when it's KD, they will still continue to pay those guys when it's Steph. But the Paul George situation, just to use the most recent example,
right?
I think we're going to see less and less of that in the new CBA. I think even the Jaylen Brown example, who's not older, I don't even know if those guys are going to be guaranteed the 30% max anymore, let alone the super max if they become eligible.
I hope this changes because it boggles my mind and has for years why the allowed max increases the older you become. Like the 10 years of service / now you're eligible for 35% of the salary cap just seems so stupid to me. Because of course someone with name and brand recognition, they're like, I'm worth it. Like, I want the 35% max. And some teams like, yeah, well, we need butts and seats, so we'll give it to you.
That's like corporate America in a nutshell, though, because it's just like when you have these CEOs that are a bunch of white dudes in their 60s making more money than they ever have, but you know that they're not pulling their weight relative to like the people that actually hustle. It's when now this is ageism, and it doesn't apply to everybody, so I recognize there's that stereotype as well. But I think it's tough to wrap my head around because like I don't want people to be telling me I need to take a pay cut when I'm turning 60 or something. But when you're dealing at this scale, I totally get like it's just different when you're talking about the average worker versus an NBA player or a corporate C-product. It's way different.
Like, could you imagine if Dame signed for the fun max instead, like 25%? He wouldn't go hungry, Dan.
He's got a family to feed, man. Latrell Sprewell.
Oh, I remember that. And I remember the exact number too. That was 3 years, 21 million. And he was like, I have kids to feed.
We got to pour one out for David Zaslav. His total compensation when you include stock options, I think, is dropping from like 50 or 60 to like 10 million. I don't even know how he's supposed to survive on that.
Poor man.
CEO of Warner or whatever his title is for Warner Discovery that they like to show on maybe they won't anymore since my parent company no longer owns the rights, but like showing him on the celebrity row is just like, we got to stop. No one fucking cares.
I'm still very disappointed that he killed the Batgirl film. I will always resent him for that.
I resent him for a lot of things, but that's neither here nor there. Are we ready to move on? What do you think? So, quick, just synopsis. Do you think, doesn't have to be, because some of this stuff will happen after the draft. Fast forward to opening night. The number 3 pick, the player that is taken with it, is that player on Philly or another team?
I mean, so you're asking me specifically about a player taken at the 3rd pick. I do not think that player is on the Philadelphia 76ers.
I mean, that encompasses all the scenarios, whether it's just a move down or, like you said, using it to get off salary. Yeah. Let's talk and wrap up with the Toronto Raptors. Mort, what's your question?
My question is one out of frustration, because it's not really a question. It's just roster balance much. I mean, look, I've said this before. I'm going to repeat myself. I did not hate that version of the Toronto Raptors that entered this season. Unfortunately, injuries disallowed them from really getting into the swing of things. Like, you had Emmanuel Quickley miss games, you had RJ Barrett miss games, you had Scotty Barnes miss games. They never went on like the same timeline in terms of the season. And that was a big shame. I hated it because I wanted to see what that team would look like, and we never got a chance to see it. And now we won't, Dan, because they traded for Brandon Ingram and then gave him 40 freaking million. And now I am like dimensions less enthused about that team.
Okay, who did they give up that ruined just what you want to see with the team?
It's basically him coming in and taking the ball, controlling the ball. He's not exactly a seamless injection, seamless fit, I would argue. Now you have like these three wings that has to figure it out. You have Quickly, you have Grady Dick, you have Jakob Poeltl. Like, it's just
Ochai Agbaji. Shout out.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good name. It just seems to me that now there are too many chefs in the kitchen, especially at the wing spot. I would have liked to see how this team would have looked minus specifically, a Brandon Ingram type. I wanted to see someone who was more off-ball inclined, more three-point oriented, not someone who has been very reluctant as a shooter. I'm just fearful that we're going to see like the worst version of multiple ball handler syndrome.
I think that is a real risk, but I want to tell you why I'm more optimistic than you are.
Great. I can't wait.
RJ Barrett gets shipped from New York to Toronto. And I think this season, when you look at the way he played, early on it was encouraging, the playmaking, ebbs and flows, of course, like every season, but they were so banged up. But he comes over from the Knicks. They start to get him. This is not someone who was doing this a lot in New York. They started to get him moving more without the ball, getting him runway. He goes from where it was like, I think 60% of his 2-pointers that season in New York were going unassisted to now 63% of his 2-pointers in Toronto are going assisted. And they have a blueprint with their system to get guys who are maybe not used to working off the ball as much, not just to be catch and shoot guys, but dudes who will move without the ball under Darko Rajakovic. And I think that's part of the reason why I think that he's, I don't know if you could be underrated when you've only been coaching for a couple seasons, but I think just what he's done in Toronto, it hasn't amounted to wins. But I think that there's a style there that it can work with players where they become tough to fit together. Now, to your point, it's different when you have RJ Barrett and Scotty Barnes, and I'm going to use Jakob Poeltl just because he's a non-spacer. And now you're just adding RJ Barrett into a situation where, there's like only one guy in Scotty Barnes who needs to have the ball a ton. Now you're adding Brandon Ingram where in theory, Emmanuel Quickley moves well off the ball. But so yes, there's more chefs there. And so I think that's a risk. I'm more optimistic just because I think that the way that their offense is run, if you can find a way to put, and this is the bigger problem actually for me, how do you surround, especially if you're going to play Ingram and Barrett and Barnes together for any stretches at a time, it needs to be with two other shooters around them.
Yep.
So quickly, one, done. But now you're in a situation where you need your 5 to probably space the floor, which Jakob Poeltl.
You're about to say Chris Boucher. You're about to make a Chris Boucher point.
Well, I was actually, so you know me too well. But I'm just saying for that type of lineup structure, bringing Chris Boucher back, however much, and they'll probably will. He's gonna get a statue in Toronto. I think at this point that's pretty cemented. But like that is more of the challenge to me, or it's we have to stagger these guys a bunch because I think what we've seen with Toronto's offense, and especially I'm more encouraged because pretty much a lot of that time is they did have Kelly Olynyk there as well, but it's not like they've had pristine spacing at all, like over these past couple seasons. Like Emmanuel Quickley's been battling injuries too. Scotty Barnes' jumper waxes and wanes. RJ Barrett ebbs and flows to his jumper as well, and defenses don't really like respect him the way that they would other guys. So I'm more optimistic, but I think to me it's more about you need to optimize the chess pieces that are around them if you're going to move forward with, again, the three guys I'm looking, or I'm going to frame it this way. If you're going to plan to move forward with at least three of the four, let alone all four, of Jakob Poeltl, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, and Brandon Ingram, there's we got to see a material shift in the supporting cast, or Grady Dick needs to make a monster leap. And again, even at that point, I think you probably need a different look at the five. We're not saying you have to move Poeltl, but you need some spacing at that position.
I seem to recall after the Ingram acquisition, Raptors fans making some of the same points about, this team is going to need more floor spacing. And someone were bringing up Vooch as because as a 1-year thing. I like that in theory, but my question is, what then? He doesn't fit the timeline. Spacing centers are not always easy to find. If you're relying upon identifying and acquiring a floor spacing big man, that's a tough ask.
What about Karl-Anthony Towns?
What are you relinquishing? I'm interested.
I think you have to. I mean, there's probably a third team, so I don't know if the Knicks want RJ Barrett back, but you have the Poeltl salary, you have the Barrett salary.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're not giving up quickly in that scenario. So it's you can get to you have Dick, you have Akbaji. You could make if you were the Knicks and said we'll take Jakob Poeltl, and are you giving them Dick and or Akbaji, and then you're finding a taker for RJ Barrett at that point? You can make the math work. I don't know what you have to really believe in your defense at that point.
Yeah, you do. But that would also be fun in New York because you'd get more
bodies,
more depth. Yeah. Yeah. And as you just said, love to give New York Dick. Great.
And there's also just, they're not going to, they would have to there still need to be moves made, but getting a Brook Lopez here or not. He's older though, so you're concerned about the longer horizon.
Yeah.
Is there something to be done with Minnesota and Naz Reid in a sign and trade scenario?
That'd be fun. Again, salary-wise, you would need to identify the right pieces. They'd have to be interested.
I mean, honestly, the Nets just have to be involved in all these scenarios.
Yeah,
it's just to take
true.
on some money. Hey, you already said you'd take on RJ Barrett. So if it's Minnesota's getting picks for Naz Reid and the Nets are getting Barrett, maybe that's the framework there.
Are the Nets going to be the team that makes the most trades this summer?
We recorded, Grant and I recorded a podcast where we essentially said that they're the team that's going to define the NBA offseason, because I don't think any major blockbuster deal goes down without them being tangentially involved.
That feels like a fair compromise. Yeah.
So we're this is why this exercise is fun. We're kind of talking about my question too, which is, I don't know if you saw the report. It was about at the beginning of June. I believe it was Brian Windhorst had it, where he said that the Raptors are in the market for a big fish, which I find fascinating because in theory, Brandon Ingram was the big fish at the trade deadline because of the opportunistic cost it was to get him, and he's yet to take the floor for them. So we're talking about, how do you make this work? If you're the Raptors, would you consider, we're even talking about Naz Reid is kind of a moderate move, but are you making a big move if you're the Raptors without having seen any of this really? And Brandon Ingram has not played for the Raptors yet. That we haven't seen him with Scotty Barnes or RJ Barrett or Quickly or Poeltl or nobody. If you're the Raptors, are you do you think that you just have enough information on what this team is going to be that you would, I guess the Kevin Durant conversation is one thing, but that you would just go out and get another big fish immediately after, semi-immediately after acquiring one and not having seen him play yet?
I'm going to give you a very boring answer. That depends on who the big fish is, specifically.
Karl-Anthony Towns.
I mean, then I guess I'm okay with that because it's a great positional need. But like you said, you have to trust the defense. You have to trust everything. Or you have to want to be the next Pacers in regards to, let's lead the league in scoring and pace. And I could see that. I don't mind teams leaning into a certain identity. It's fine. If the Raptors want to say, fuck defense, let's score 140. Sure, they're probably going to be like a top 5 league pass team for me. Like, it just has to make sense.
All right, so I'll throw some names out there then. This is a fun exercise. Kristaps Porzingis,
Too injury thrown. I don't trust it.
even on the expiring.
No, the contractual element is fine. It's like, how many games are we going to get out of him?
What about Jaren Jackson Jr.? Let's say the Memphis Grizzlies do decide to rebuild.
See, that is a fun team for him as well. More wings there to help out on the rebounding. I don't hate that. Even Quickly is like a really good rebounder for his size. So like his shortcomings in that particular branch of basketball might actually not be amplified in the same way that it's been before. Offers floor spacing, offers damn near a point per minute. Yeah, I don't hate that. That's fun.
What'd you do? I threw his name out there already, but Kevin Durant, like the trade that's been floating around is, would you give up the whoever you draft at number 9 with, it's probably 2. It's like RJ Barrett and Pirtle, let's just say, is like the money.
Yeah, that begins to be a little tight, right? Like that. Then you're like, that's a lot to give up for a 37-year-old, despite the fact that he's still immensely great.
Domas Sabonis.
I love Sabonis, but I am generally pivoting off non-3, non-D guys. I know you're higher on him as a shooter than I am, and I concede that the percentages have been perfectly reasonable as of late. The volume, however, is still low to a point where I'm not entirely buying into that yet.
I think that's fair, and also that's someone else who's best with the ball in his hands for the most part.
Yeah. It's another chef.
You said yes to Naz Reid already, right?
Yeah.
What about, who do we got here? What about Bam Adebayo?
I trust his floor spacing capabilities now. I think we've gotten that up to a reasonable amount. Yeah, like, but that's, God, like, you would have to give up a ton for Bam, right? Like, what?
Well, they said big fish.
He's a big fish. Yeah, like, I just wonder what the deal is.
You know what would be interesting? Yeah, from a floor spacing perspective, no, but Anthony Davis, if the Mavs do decide to pivot and rebuild around Cooper Flag.
Do you think Scotty Barnes is even being entertained as a trade option?
Depending, I'll go back to your answer of, I think it just depends. Like, if it's Giannis, yes. I think there's a level. If it's for a top 10 player, I would say yes. After that, I think you probably get dicey. Like, there are names, like if it's Jaylen Brown, I'd probably say no, especially looking at the contracts.
Am I being harsh by saying I still don't have any idea what Scotty Barnes really is?
I don't know what his ceiling is. I think his general ceiling to me is all NBA player. I think that is still there. Just the positional versatility and functional versatility on defense. And he has that same element on offense. The jumper needs to be this swing. Like, we've just kind of seen hints of, and I know that's reductive, but we've seen the 3-point shot ebb and throw. We've seen kind of the ebb and flow. We've seen the pull-up twos kind of ebb and flow. I think he's shown as a playmaker strides, and also as like maybe kind of doing some of the big man stuff. And now that you have all these ball handlers, or do we need to look at Scotty Barnes as the screener more often? I'm very high on Scotty Barnes.
That's fair. I used to compare him to like a new era Andre Iguodala. And I think so far, I'm not hating that comp as opposed to like, a tier 1 superstar who I think a lot of people went that route. And I got caught up in that as well after his rookie season. Like, I thought, oh, good Lord, for someone that young to be that productive at both sides of the ball, like, hell yeah. I was expecting significant improvement already in year 2. And like now in year 4, it felt like he had like this one jump from year 2 to year 3 and then kind of stagnated again. So like, it feels like we have 2 cases of him stagnating. That concerns me.
I think next year's a huge year for him. That's another, you want another reductive take? That's my take. I think next year's huge for him.
Yeah. I mean, look, when this was earlier in his career, I heard some things, that he just didn't really take the game all that seriously, that he didn't have the necessary work ethic. That scared the bejesus out of me. Then he apparently started taking things way more Like seriously, he started ramping up his workouts, and then he had the All-Star season last year, which just to me that just begs the question: what happened in between year 3 and year 4? What happened?
I mean, I think we sometimes also forget that these guys are kids. Well, like, I know they're making millions of dollars, so
Yeah,
there's a
no,
level
that's
of
fair.
responsibility incumbent. But I just sometimes, when it comes to diets, I try to think about like I fancy myself like a fitness junkie wannabe, whatever.
Right.
That didn't click for me until my late 20s.
Okay.
Like that, when I became like really focused on nutrition and stuff. So I know they have, it's a different situation, like, but I think we sometimes just forget. Like, I don't even know if it's a matter of clicking, of just like, okay, you come in, you're this, and then it's all right. I'm just maturing a little bit.
Like, I get that, and I buy that, but it also means that I, as an NBA organization, will have to eventually make a call on where do we have him here. Like, is he our franchise player? Is he more of a complimentary player? And I'm not saying this to criticize him, by the way. I actually greatly enjoy watching him play. I think he provides so many interesting and fascinating aspects in terms of like the rebounding, the playmaking when he pushes the ball, like the ball handling at his size, the fact that he just grabs so many steals that he gets into like challenging shots at the rim. Like there's really no shots that's safe around him. So like he does give you a shit ton of positives. I'm not trying to talk him down, but I do think that if he is to be like your main guy, especially nowadays, the scoring and especially the scoring efficiency, it has to be like a part of that package.
I think the fact that they've been linked to wanting a bigger fish makes me wonder, and even the fact that they brought in Brandon Ingram makes me wonder if they view Scotty Barnes offensively as more of their number 2 option moving
Yeah.
forward, is something I've given a lot of consideration to.
I mean, look, that would be fantastic, especially if the shot comes around a little bit, because I would go as far as to say, Dan, even in today's NBA, if your second option is hitting 27% of his threes, that's a concern.
Again, I would also just like to see him in a different like environment where there is better
Yeah.
spacing around
Yeah.
him. What does that look like? For sure. Last couple names I have for you, Jabari Smith.
In terms of like the guy who should be brought in,
Like, you could play him at the 5. Does give you some floor spacing there.
you know, I'm not high on Jabari, but this might be a situation where I think that is like he would get more chances there, which would finally reveal who he is as a player. So yeah, I don't hate that.
You know what would be right up this team's alley and just really shouldn't be playing full-time 5, but he could play some 5 for them, would be PJ Washington.
6'7", like he'd be smaller than most of their wings.
And by the way, you mentioned, this is why I'll bring this guy up too. Like, if you're just looking for lower end solutions,
Right.
like this might be a Jalen Smith team come in and give you some stretch at the 5 spot.
Yeah, that would be good. I would like to see him get more minutes somewhere. This could be fun, especially if they lean into the offensive side, because Jalen Smith can hoop and he can score, man. He can score at a great deal. So, and he's not afraid to pull the trigger from the outside either. That'd be fun. And he can even block shots, even though he's not the best defender. And his rebounding is freaking elite. Now that name might be my favorite.
And this isn't a center, but I think like he's the player that ideally a Grady Dick and or an Akbaji would be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's available, but I've seen his name thrown out there just a bunch when it comes to people speculating. And I also think people need to either watch him more, just because the offers I've seen just don't align with anywhere near his value. But you have number 9 as a starting point, and you can include Dick and Akbaji and future picks. This team needs a Trey Murphy. I mean, I guess every team could need a Trey Murphy, but specifically this team needs a Trey Murphy.
Another you want to just have a team full of small forwards, I can tell.
Well, no, I'm saying you need shooting around these primary ball handlers, even if you're going to stagger them. So you figure out the center. Like, I don't think they just need a floor spacing center. I think they need floor spacing, period.
I agree, but like if you're not moving Barnes or Ingram or Barrett, right, in that scenario,
I mean, you could move Barrett. I think
you
the only.
could.
I mean, you're obviously not going to move Ingram back to New Orleans, like we know that. But
right, obviously, but like it was just I mean, look, I could have fun with that. Like if you add him to that, you'll have 4 small forwards and like a lead guard. Fuck it, let's get nuts.
And look, I think that's just when you're looking at free agency and either minimums or bargains, like this should be a team that's like, oh, could we take a flyer on a Landry Shamet or a Luke Kennard? Like that doesn't fix everything, but I think that papers over like just some of their functional like redundancies that they have offensively. Anyway,
am I misremembering wasn't Luke Kennard there at one point? No,
in Toronto?
Oh, he was not. I don't know why. I was picturing him in a Raptors jersey, and that felt like that was resembling something. So I might just be projecting onwards. That's a good name.
Yeah, Yo could also work here. I mean, he would have to go back to shooting threes, but Isaiah Stewart might be interesting.
I'm very much for a 3-point shooting Isaiah Stewart. Yes.
Again, this would have to be a sign and trade, and we already mentioned him. I don't even remember for what team. Oh, the Nets, but Santi Aldama.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, fun. Not defensively great, but yeah.
I guess my point would be the Santi Aldama, the Isaiah Stewart, like those level of players feels like a move that I think Toronto should pursue and could make, but like short of the Durant one's interesting, but like short of just we're not talking about this name yet and they become available and it's a no-brainer, I just can't see this team actually going the big fish route without having seen to single out 2 names specifically, like what does the Barnes-Ingram dynamic look like?
Right. Do you think teams are caught up in that so much though?
If you want to maximize them, you almost can't be because it might require that. But if you traded for Brandon Ingram and then gave him $40 million a year with the idea that, we need to go out and make one more massive move, like that's a little problematic.
No, I don't disagree. But I just wonder if teams are like, we have so much data on these guys. We have a conceptual theory in mind of how this will look, and we can go off of that. Not saying I agree with it, but
yeah, and I also think in the Raptors case, just because we've seen it before, is they might have just viewed the Brandon Ingram situation as look at how little we needed to give up to get someone who in a vacuum has way more value than that. And like that's why they're interested in Kevin Durant. It's okay, it might only be for a year, but it actually increases our title equity, maybe cleans up our books a little bit moving forward, and we're getting this player who, if he was to be traded and like you knew that if he had 2 years left on his deal, like it would cost more to get him. And it feels like that's how the Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster front office really thinks.
Yeah.
Which I don't hate that aspect of it. So I find their offseason, we haven't done their offseason look at it yet, but I find their offseason wildly fascinating. You have anything else on the Atlantic Division, or are you ready to skedaddle?
I think I'm ready to skedaddle for this time, sir.
Can you just tell our listeners where they can find you and all the fantastic erotica that you put out?
Oh, yeah. All my erotica can be found. Well, not all of it at the same place, but you can
it's
find
soft.
it
It's softcore erotica.
Softcore. At least now. I mean, the summer's just getting started, so we'll see. But you can find my work over at Yahoo Sports. You can find it over at Forbes, at the NBA Podcast, and if you speak Danish, over at Buzzerbeat.
Until next time, and as always, leave with the shout out to the one, the only, future maxed out Toronto Raptors floor spacing center, Mr. Frank Ntilikina.